Well, I think he's a little protective of himself, Chris. I think he's clearly a thoughtful guy. He is a methodical guy. Joe Biden is a thoughtful guy, but he's not a methodical guy. And that clip that you just showed of Joe in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, you've got to realize he's standing within a 45-minute drive of the home of the Foleys, the parents of Jim Foley, who was executed 2 weeks ago. And Joe was unafraid to express out loud the horror that most Americans feel about these executions and about what might be on the horizon. You use the phrase war, everybody uses the phrase war weary. You use the phrase war weary, W-A-R-Y, and that's an apt phrase to use today because we ought to remember, all of us out there ought to remember with all of this talk, all of these op-eds, all of this radio conservative right-wing talk, all of these tweets that 50 years ago this summer, Chris, the Gulf of Tonkin resolution was passed. And 11, 12 years later, there are 58,000 names on a wall in Washington, D.C. We're going to get ISIS. We're going to clean their clock. But let's pump the brakes and do it the correct way with a bunch of other nations in a coalition.
Here's a question I put to you about the visceral reaction, which I felt it during the Iranian hostage crisis when I was writing speeches for President Carter. I hate it every day. I love the job, the honor of it. Every day I hate it. I go to a bar, people were mad at me. Because here our guys were just being trooped around and the flag was being burnt, but they weren't being beheaded. I don't think any president can take 2 weeks, every 2 weeks another beheading, or whatever the sequence is going to be. And the president can talk, as Mike did well there, about how someday we'll get them, we'll encircle them, we'll put an alliance together against them, we'll coalition, we'll get them eventually. Eventually, that could be 60 beheadings from now.
Well, right, and I think that is part of the problem, the paradox that this administration finds itself in. You've got Joe Biden who's saying, we will follow them to the gates of hell. Well, some of us are asking, well, what does that mean? Does that mean boots on the ground? Does that mean a military engagement? Does it mean coalition forces? The definitional aspect of this, Chris, I think bothers people more than anything else. So whether you're war-weary or war-wary, what you want to know is, what are you going to do given the crisis that's currently in front of the administration? It is boxed in the corner, and you and I have talked about this before, on its earlier efforts to get out of Iraq, and now it finds itself having to circle back in through another door, if you will, and that's a problem, rhetorically and otherwise, for the president.